Peace and prosperity are only had where force and threat of force is real against men determined to do evil, but where free men have the sole right and power of force and its threat, as do Americans, but relinquish it, those bent on evil shall abuse the power of force and its threat. Peace and prosperity shall become confusion and poverty for those refusing to partake in the evil schemes of those in power. Hitler, for a time, seized and held level of power, bringing order into Germany. Mussolini did so in Italy, Capone in Chicago, Pendergast in Kansas City. History abounds with like instances of order being brought about not by law but by the will of mere men, operating through thugs, using force and threat of force, extortion, bribery, and abuse of the otherwise lawful offices of government. Any apparent tranquility in such a state of affairs never lasts, and always ends in violence, with heartache in its wake. Bottom line, free men have never had more than two choices: hold on to their rightful use of power, or relinquish that power to thugs, whether calling themselves government, as did Hitler and Mussolini, or calling themselves businessmen, as did Capone and Pendergast. Once free men relinquish their right of force to others, promising to protect them, such hope protectors shall, in time, become their masters and their abusers. This is from a book called Militia of the Several States Primer by Brent Allen Winters, Our Constitution's Answers to Its Enemies. Alright, recommend everybody pick up a copy. This was from the afterword chapter, so towards the end. Now let me just read the first line again. Peace and prosperity are had only where force and threat of force is real against men determined to do evil. When's the last time you said no? You said here on this line and no further. And I don't mean this line and then they cross it and then it's like, oh no, this line. Because you know what happens? You say, oh no, that line, oh no, that line, and then you're in a corner. Keep backing up into a corner. And that's what they do. Because they know you're bluffing. Because you've done it before. You've bluffed for decades, haven't you, Americans? You want peace? Prepare for war, as our founder said. If you want peace, prepare for war. Peace brings prosperity. But we shall have peace only under liberty. Peace and prosperity are only had where force and threat of force is real against men determined to do evil. As Mao said, a great dictator, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. We must be ready. We must always be ready to defend our rights. You know, I was thinking about this situation going on in Ukraine, watching some videos on YouTube about it. And you just look at the men in that country. The men. Some women too, but obviously mostly men, right? And they're ready for Russia with all this stuff going on right now. Regardless of what side you believe in on that whole thing. You look at them, they're ready. And it was funny because, we're supposed to be almost the epitome of militia, of men bearing arms. But those Ukrainian men, they're tough. I remember watching a video, I think it was from back in 2014 when the war there really started. And this militia, they roll into a police station, armed, basically like this. There had to be at least a dozen of them, if not more. I'm sure you have a dozen friends, right? Think about it. So, about a dozen of them, or more, roll into this police station, basically hold all the policemen in that town, and they say, you're not going for the rights of Ukrainian men and women. You're not upholding them. You're not protecting our country. You're letting these Russian militants come in here, whatever the case was. And the police are just kind of standing there like, what do we do now? Like, oh shit, right? Like, they got us. Like, what do we do? No policeman is going to fight back when you show up with 12, 24, 30 men. And you go, hey, you need to start doing your job. Right? Threat of force, or violence and the threat of violence is real. Or where force and the threat of force is real, is what it says in this one. Against men determined to do evil. You cannot bluff. Oh, when they come for my guns, I'll be there. Okay, well, where were you when they came for all of our other 9 Bill of Rights? Oh, those didn't matter. You just want to feel like you're a man because you have a gun. Continue on with the book. God's order and its true peace reign where free men hold onto their God-given, non-delegatable power of force, delegating it to no other. This truth our American forebears had learnt well and understood deeply. Accordingly, they approved of 3 militia clauses in the body of our Constitution, and then the Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights, without debate, much less any dissent. Americans have been blessed above all people because a critical mass of them have neither acted nor lived upon the speculative utopian fantasy that men in power are trustworthy, but instead upon an undisputed fact of history. Men are tainted with corruption, and their power will only feed it. Men at their best are still only men, at best. To be sure, history shows that freedom is dangerous, but the alternative is worse than dangerous. It is hellish. You might have to sacrifice. You might have to sleep outside. You might have to poop in a hole. You might not be able to take a shower. You might go to jail. You may lose your brother to the war. You may lose your house, your money, your sacred honor. You may lose your life. Your wife may end up a widow. Your children may end up orphans. Freedom is dangerous. And truly only dangerous men can handle it. Are you a dangerous man? Or are you a slave? Because to be a free man, you have to be dangerous. To be a free man, you have to sacrifice. To be a free man, You must be assertive. Cowards will not take our country back. Oh, please, please don't take my rights away. Please, please don't fire me because I didn't get the jab. Oh, please. Oh, Republicans, will you help us? Please fight for our rights or we won't elect you again. But we will because we don't want the other guy in, so never mind. Please help us. No, you have to be assertive. Like those men of Ukraine were. You know what those men of Ukraine said? You don't want to see us back here at this police department. Don't make us come back. You know what will happen when we come back? We're letting you off easy right now. But we come back, it's going to be a different story. We're going to come back with more. Isn't that right? You got to be assertive. With anything in life. Freedom is dangerous. It's for dangerous men. It's for men of sacrifice. It's selfless service. You don't care about yourself. Men go out to protect others. To protect the women. To protect the children. The sad reality is men fight for freedom. Some women do too. But men fight for freedom. And many don't get to enjoy the blessings of it. Because sacrifice is needed. It's like when you see that woman, or your wife, or your sister, or your mother, or just a random woman on the street. She gets attacked by another man. The other man tries to rape her. You go out and you protect her. You want her to be safe. You're going to give her safety by going out and either making a stand and a presence and scaring that other man off, or physically getting involved, which goes back to the force or threat of force, right? It has to be real. Can't go out and threaten to force and not have anything to back it up, because there are times you will be challenged. You go out, and now you have to force that other man off of your wife, or off of your sister, or off of that random woman who you don't know. Because you want her to be safe, right? Well, now you're giving up your safety. Now you do not know safety. You're going over there to fight for safety. All the while putting yourself in harm's way, meaning you don't have safety. That's what freedom is. You go out to fight for freedom, and you might not get that freedom because you die. Although, if you're right with the Lord, you will have freedom when you die up in heaven. So I encourage you guys to get that settled as well. Freedom. It's about sacrifice. It's about honor. You don't want to fight for our freedom? Become a refugee. Go flee somewhere else. But there is nowhere else to go. You want to be a victim? You want to beg for your rights back? You might as well just comply. If you're not going to do anything, you might as well just comply. Isn't that right, Americans? Might as well just take the jab and wear the mask. It's about freedom. That's our common bond as Americans, is freedom. It's not about being a white Anglo-Saxon country. It's not about being a Christian country either. Although the principles, as you'll learn in this book, the principles of the Bible is the reason why we had such a free country, why we were such free-spirited men. Because those principles and values are underlined in the Bible. It's not about being a Christian country either. It's about freedom. It's about freedom. And if you're a Christian out there, let me explain something for you. You live in a free country, right? You live in a free country. You can go out freely and exercise your religion. You can go out freely and go door to door and preach the gospel. You can go out freely and start a business. Or not even a business, but a non-profit. Print Bibles. Make Bibles. Give them out. You know what you can't do? If you don't live in a free country, you can't do any of that. Can't go to church. You've seen that here, right? About a year ago, 2 years ago. Seen that. Can't go to church. Can't go door to door. Can't preach your religion. Can't save souls. You know why the United States of America? You know why in this country we made more Bibles than any other country? You know why in this country we've sent out missionaries all over the world, more missionaries than any other country in the history of the world? You know why? It's about freedom. Freedom. Go to any other country in the world where there's Christians. Or even where there's just a few Christians there. Go to any of the country in the world. And you ask them, hey, who started this church? You know, what's the history of this church? I'm interested in it. They'll tell you. It's not a fact, but there's a good probability, let's say more than 50% of the probability, that church will tell you, yeah, you know, back in the 70s or back in the 40s or whatever, back in the 50s, some American missionary came by, he built our church, he went soul winning, he built this church. And even to this day, you know, some church in America gives us money. Right? Isn't that right? Or even Bible translations. Bible that has been translated into obscure languages, tribal languages that only have a couple thousand speakers. Who translated that? Americans. It's true. Because you know why? Because freedom leads to peace and prosperity. Freedom leads to peace and prosperity, and peace and prosperity leads to you being able to do whatever you want. And if you're a Christian now, that peace and prosperity, oh look, your members, they got good jobs. They can give a good tithe. Those tithes to the church can be used for missionaries. They can be used for Bibles. Can be used for education. All these things. But in order to do that, you need freedom. In order to have freedom, you need dangerous men. The alternative is hellish. The alternative is a nightmare. The alternative is 10 times worse than Corona fascism. Corona fascism is pretty bad, wouldn't you guys agree? It can get a lot worse. Imagine living in Nazi Germany, where you're forced to fight some war. And in that war, you go out and you kill the Jews. You kill the undesirables. Now, don't even just imagine that you're one of those undesirables. Is that, you know, that's horrible in itself, right? You're one of those Jews, or you're one of those Poles, one of those gypsies. You're just an average citizen. Just an average 18-year-old male. Nazi Germany. Now you're forced into the army. So you have to be the one to go kill those undesirables. You have to be the one to go fight an unjust war. You have to be the one who goes out in the middle of the winter without proper winter clothing to go fight a war. Because your crazy leader doesn't believe in God, he believes in the signs and the stars of astrology, and that's why he sent you out there. Look it up. That's the Battle of the Bulge, ladies and gentlemen. For all you neo-Nazis out there, it's a true story. The alternative is hellish and dangerous. Freedom is dangerous, and tyranny is hellish and dangerous. Because you will be forced to fight some war regardless. You don't want to kill? Too bad. Either be a victim, go with the tides of the wind, and usually, if you're a man, the tides of the wind requires you to join some army, to fight some war you don't believe in. So why not fight a war that you do believe in? Why not fight for something right rather than being forced to fight for something that's wrong? Get in shape. Join your local militia. Own a firearm. A well-regulated militia. Let's go back to the book. This is from the 4th Militia Clause, chapter of the book. The phrase well-regulated militia denotes the always well-armed, ready-to-fight people. In a word, a well-regulated militia is those individuals of the able-bodied people that keep at least one loaded firearm in their homes and bear them whenever they are outside their homes. The word militia, in its general sense, when it's standing alone, refers to the non-military yet able-bodied population. That is, all the people. Thus, have the writers always used the term. Further, the framers understood this militia, the people, in two parts, the non-regulated and non-regular militia, and the regulated and regular militia. The non-regular militia is that of the people able to arm themselves and to be ready to fight at a moment's notice, but have not done so. By contrast, the regular militia is that part of the people always well armed, prepared, ever ready, and willing to train or fight upon being called out. That is, upon a moment's notice. Thus did the Massachusetts militia that responded to resist the Redcoats at Concord and Lexington call themselves the Minutemen, in distinction from the non-regular militia. The Constitution's framers put our common law freedoms and limits on government compact draft because Americans in that day needed no explanation. They were familiar with the common law limits on government and how their rights limited government. In colonial days, regulate signified that something was regular, always in the same condition or readiness. When the framers of the Second Amendment, therefore, used the term regular in reference to the militia, they mean that part of the people Sorry, someone's coming by this dusty road. Want to make sure who it is. When the framers of the Second Amendment, therefore, use the term regular in reference to the militia, they mean that the part of the people always standing ready, ever ready to fight. Indeed, regularity still means to be the same in day and day out. Day in and day out. Thus, for example, our American Navy distinguishes between the regular Navy and the non-regular Navy or reserves. The regular Navy is always on active duty, always armed, and always ready to fight. The reserves are not, even when called to active duty. No reservist is a regular. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a man between the ages of 16 and 60, it is your duty to be a militiaman. But 60, that's old. Alright, I got a little story for all you senior patriots out there. Won't spend too much time on it. Got other things to talk about, but Look up a man called Samuel Whitmore. My understanding, he was about 78 years old, if not older. He went on to take the British Redcoats in the battles of Lexington and Concord. Really, the retreat to Boston is what it's called. He went on to fight the Redcoats. He was shot multiple times, stabbed in the chest, and he lived. And he was a veteran of the French and Indian War. 78 years old, went out to fight. Saw the British column coming past his house, went out to fight. He was ready. He was armed. There's no excuse. You know, it's not my fault that for so many years you're fat, lazy, and like to eat junk your whole life. Turn it around. Get in shape. You know why your back's so bad? Because you didn't use it. You know why your back's so bad? Because you sat down for 60 years. You know why you don't feel good? You know why you can't hike up a mountain? Because you, for one, have rarely, if ever, done it. And two, because you eat junk. But I just have a cookie and a soda every now and then. It's not too bad. Yeah, it is. You know how long we've had this junk food around in human history? Not long. People back then, they just ate what was necessary. People back then, they understood herbal remedies and herbal medications. Homeopathy. Right? You have to be ready at a moment's notice. The motto of the United States Army Infantry is shoot, move, and communicate. Maybe that's not the motto, but that's what we say all the time. Right? Most people today, whether you call yourself a militiaman or a patriot or a 3%er or just a good old boy, whatever you call yourself, they just focus on the first part, shooting, which is important. You have to be a good shot. You have to be accurate with your rifle. You have to know how to disassemble your rifle. All that. But shooting doesn't mean anything if you don't got the other two. Shoot, move, and communicate. You can't move if you're 300 pounds. I'm sorry, but you can't. You can't communicate if you just watch Fox News every day. You don't get a book like this and read it. Or the Ranger Handbook. Or Light Infantry Tactics, which is another training manual. You have to shoot, move, and communicate. That's the standard. So when this book is talking about the regulated militia, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, no other amendment says that it's necessary for a free state. It doesn't say that your freedom of religion is necessary for a free state. I mean, it is necessary for a free state, but it's not, you exercising that religion is not. But you exercising and being a well-regulated militia is. A militiaman who is ready to be called up at a moment's notice. Who can respond in a minute. And when it means a minute, it doesn't mean, oh, you're at the battle in a minute, because that's impossible, right? It means you get all your gear ready, put it on in a minute. Right? If you're not ready in a minute, then when your neighbor over there is being threatened or forced by government, then he stands alone. Right? If you're not ready, he stands alone. And what's that common saying? First they came for the Jews. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the communists. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the nihilist. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a nihilist. Then they came for the Buddhist. I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Buddhist. But then they came for me. And when they came for me, nobody was left to speak out for me. If you don't speak out for others, then there will be no one to speak out for you. That includes Muslims, that includes communists, that includes Antifa. That includes our enemies. If you don't believe in freedom so much to give it to the guy down the street, then you don't deserve it. Nonetheless, I'll fight for your freedom anyways. But if you don't believe in that guy's freedom, the freedom of the guy down the street, then you don't defend his freedom. Who will defend your freedom? No one. And you know what happens when you go out and you defend that Muslim down the street and his freedom? Say he's got some mob down the street, or the government's trying to take his home away, and you and a couple cousins and your brother and a couple of their friends, the 10 or 12 of you go down the street and you tell the police, hey, knock it off. We're not going to let you do this to this guy. He might be a Muslim. He might not, he might not believe in everything about America. He might have a violent religion. He might have a prophet who's a pedophile, whatever the case may be. But he still has a right to his freedom. He still has a right to his private property. And you're not gonna do that to him. You know what happens? That guy, that Muslim man down the street, now he remembers you. And he goes, hey, those Christian white Americans over there, they're not so bad. And in fact, they supported me when nobody else would. And then they go, why is that? Maybe they see the love in Christ in you, and they get interested in Christianity, and that's a great witness. Or maybe they go, they defend my freedom. They defend my rights. They don't even like me. They think my they think my prophet's a pedophile. I had a conversation with that guy, a couple weeks ago, and I thought he was just some bigot or something, because he was telling me that Muhammad married a 9-year-old girl or something. But then now today, they come by and they defend my freedom. They tell the cops to leave me alone, stop infringing on my rights. So is that what freedom really is? You know what? I better go talk to them and ask them a couple questions. Why did you do that? It opens the door. It opens the mind. You're leading by example of what America is about. You're not just defending it for you and your friends. You're defending it for some stranger who you don't even believe, say you don't even agree with. That's freedom. That's necessary freedom. Freedom is for all people because God made freedom. God made men with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of give them to everybody. Because God gave them to everybody. God gave them to everybody. So you have to give them to everybody too. Let's get back to the book here. Indeed, for one to be ready to fight at a moment's notice means one keep one's firearms in his home loaded, and when he leaves his home, he must bear a loaded firearm on his person. In short, the Second Amendment's well-regulated militia is those individuals of people carrying loaded guns. The security of our country, says the Second Amendment, depends upon such an armed militia among us. Moreover, any government infringements that may prevent, impede, or chill this personal right to keep and bear arms by requiring permits, background checks, mechanical regulations, open-ended regulations, and etc., make our country insecure. Thus, also, the well-regulated militia is the very regular, indeed, the ever-ready militia, always armed and ever ready to fight upon threat. Fight upon threat. If the threat comes fast, even without awaiting official orders from distant command. Indeed, to keep one's firearm loaded in one's home and bear it loaded on one's person, having become familiar with one's firearm through steady use, is to be ever ready to fight. It is to strengthen our country's security. Indeed, says the Second Amendment. Such persons are necessary to our freedom. An illustration of the constitutional meaning of regular, immediately after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, General Marshall, knowing that his country was under immediate threat of more vicious attacks or even invasion, began to issue orders to staff officers by telephone. No time for the formalities of official letters or telegram. One officer, upon receiving General Marshall's call ordering him to come to Washington without the least delay to be prepared to stay the indefinite duration of need, requested 24 hours to see the safe relocation of his family. General Marshall, however, reminded him that he was in the regular army, and asked him if he knew that his country was at war. He answered yes, whereupon General Marshall demoted him, passed over him, and called another to fill this position intended for him. To General Marshall, regular army meant instant, ever-ready army. You might think, wow, that guy's mean. What an asshole. The guy just wanted to protect his family. Yeah, well, General Marshall wanted to protect his country. You should have already had a plan with your family set out to, hey, honey, if this happens, you do this, and you go there. Take the kids with you, you get this. You get these backpacks that were already ready. These, whatever. And then you go there, and that's where you'll be safe. And I go do my manly constitutional duty. And I'll end with this passage of the book, that being a militiaman, this is deeply rooted in our roots. This is deeply rooted in tradition of Anglo-Saxon common law. This goes back more than 1,000 years, to the 800s with King Alfred. And you can date it further back with the Bible. You get this book, Militia Primer by Brent Allen Winters. It talks about the biblical passages, if you're interested in that. But it's just focused on this. The roots of our common law militia. The common law's tradition's regular militia reaches back to the days of King Alfred. He lived 849 to 899, requiring every able-bodied male to carry his own weapon, even while farming. Anglo-Dane worked crews stayed out, always armed and ready to engage brigands. William I, from 1066 to 1087, went further, requiring each shop owner and landowner in England to keep a longbow and at least 40 arrows. The British Bill of Rights of 1688 states, subjects may have arms for their defense. According to Granville Sharp, concludes, the common laws of England always required the people to be armed, and not only armed, but to be an expert in arms. Are you an expert in arms? Are you always ready? Are you ready to sacrifice? Are you ready to be a dangerous man? Skip a little bit ahead here. The significance of the colonial militia, says the Supreme Court, was that it was composed of citizens primarily, soldiers on occasion. It was upon such men that the states relied on defense and securing the laws. The security of your free state, says the Second Amendment, depends upon such self-armed, able-bodied men of the people, called the state's militia. Moreover, any infringement, background checks, permits, and regulations that may prevent, impede, hamper, or even show this personal right to keep and bear arms invites thugs, whether from government or elsewhere. This right is so important to the security of our free country that its bar against infringement is not only against the government, but also against any person who power attempting to infringe. The colonial militia, said the Supreme Court in the Miller case, comprised all males physically capable of acting in concert for the common defense, who, when called for service, were expected to appear bearing arms supplied by themselves and of the kind of common use at the time. But ladies and gentlemen, let me just say this. We are incredibly blessed to live in this country. We have more firearms in the history than any country in the history of the world. You can get an AR-15, a modern military rifle, for about $400 or $500. We have over 100 guns per 100 citizens. Right? And going back to the Ukraine example, this militia I was watching in Ukraine just today, they were saying how this is all our own gear, you know, my plate gear, my uniform, my rifle, this is all our own gear. We you know, got the rifles with our hunting permits and stuff like that, is what they're saying. Yeah, we don't even need permits in most states for stuff like this. Most of us have decent enough jobs where we can afford this stuff. You know, you go to Ukraine, they're a much poorer country. They have about 10 guns per 100 citizens, but look at those men, dude. Look at those men. They're over there ready to fight against one of the best armies in the world, which is Russia, which is on their border. They're in a much worse economic situation, and yet they sacrificed their prosperity, and they bought their war gear. Now those men, they don't necessarily want to fight Russia. They know what will happen if Russia actually comes, but they're ready. Now, I don't want to fight against tyranny, but I know what will happen if tyranny comes. And I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. How about you?